This Christmas, my dad handed me a cleaning list while my sister got gifts. I smiled, nodded, and instead of decorating, I booked a flight to Rome. I let them arrive to a silent, dark house on Christmas Eve. My message simply said, "I'm spending Christmas where I'm appreciated." The panic was instant, but their revenge for my escape was worse than I ever imagined. On Christmas Eve, my dad handed me a list. Clean the house, prep dinner, wrap. The gifts, your sister's guests expect everything perfect. My mom laughed. "Don't screw this up." I smiled. That night I booked a flight to Rome. When they arrived to a silent, empty house, panic spread and then their phones buzzed with my message. Every Christmas Eve, our family follows the same script. We drive up to the cottage in Vermont, unpack the endless trunks of decorations, rehearse the image of a cozy, happy family for the dozens of guests my sister insists on inviting, and I get handed a to-do list like I'm staff. But last year, something in me snapped. It started with the list. My dad handed it to me like it was some sacred family tradition. Clean the house, prep dinner, wrap the gifts. Your sister's guests expect everything perfect. My mom glanced over and actually laughed. "Don't screw this up." I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I'd already made up my mind. First, don't know when exactly it started. Feeling like I was a live-in assistant instead of a son. Maybe it was the year after I graduated and they guilt me into staying home to help the family. I'd been working full-time since 20, but somehow every paycheck became part of their budget, utilities, groceries, family needs. But when my sister wanted a spontaneous trip to Cabo or a new set of tires, my account got a little lighter. My name never made it into the group chats where those decisions were made. I just got the receipts. They always said I owed them for raising me, for the roof over my head, for the chance to build a future without rent, training me. But any time I mentioned wanting to move out, they acted like I betrayed them. My dad once called it abandoning ship. My mom said I was being selfish, and my sister, who had never paid for anything herself, claimed I was just trying to look important, so I played alone right up until that list hit my hand. I told them I'd be heading up to the cottage a day early to get things ready. They barely looked up from their phones. Fine, whatever. I booked my flight that night, one way to Rome. I'd always wanted to go. A friend of mine had moved there the year before and kept telling me to visit. I'd saved up, slowly, quietly, selling off stuff on the side, taking extra hours at work, without telling anyone. I had just enough to make it work for 2 weeks. It was risky, but the alternative, spending another Christmas playing unpaid hosts to people who didn't see me as a person. When I landed in Italy, I turned off roaming, checked into a cheap but charming Airbnb near Trast, and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. I waited, let the clock tick, let the day come. Back in the States, they were all supposed to arrive at the holiday cottage around noon. I imagined the long driveway, the reeds already falling off from last year, the silent rooms inside that should have smelled like cinnamon and pine but were empty and cold. By 12:14 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I sent a message. "Merry Christmas. Wishing you peace, wisdom, and a touch of humility. I'm not there and I won't be. I'm spending the holiday somewhere I'm appreciated. Please don't call. I'll be back January 3rd. Love, Michael." Then I turned my phone off. The next 9 days were something I hadn't felt in a long time, freedom. But the real storm hadn't even begun. That waited for my return. The moment I stepped off the plane in Rome, everything felt quieter. Not just the noise, but inside me, like my brain finally unclenched. I remember standing in the arrivals terminal with just a backpack, no one waiting for me, no list in my hand, no eyes watching or expecting anything. It felt like a glitch in the system, like I'd slipped through some crack in the world where I didn't know anyone anything. Luca met me near Piazza Venezia. He looked different, calmer, healthier than when he lived back in New Jersey. We hadn't seen each other in over a year, but he didn't ask why I came. He just handed me a coffee and said he'd booked a table for dinner. We didn't talk about family. He didn't push. For the first few days, I didn't say much to anyone, I just walked. Rome was in that strange space, between Christmas and New Year's, festive but slowed down. I visited churches I couldn't name, sat on random benches watching people, stood on bridges at night while lights from passing boats rippled on the river. I didn't post anything online, didn't call home, just breathed like I hadn't in years, but even in that piece something noted at me. I kept checking my phone, not unlocking it, just looking at the black screen for notifications. I turned off roaming and didn't connect to Wi-Fi, on purpose, but every morning I tapped the side button and stared, waiting, wondering, not because I wanted to go back, but because I wanted to see how far the fire had spread. It took 3 days before I caved. I connected to Luca's Wi-Fi just long enough for the notifications to roll in. My mom had called me 13 times, my dad 11, my sister, who never called unless she needed something, left 2 voicemails. And one message that just said, "Where are you?" There were other messages too, a few aunts, 2 of my cousins, one of my uncle's wives. The tone shifted as the days went on. The first were confused, then came guilt, then anger. Full sentences turned to short, sharp words, accusations, sarcasm, demands. My dad wrote, "You better have a damn good explanation." My mom, "Everyone's asking where you are. This is humiliating." My sister, "If I have to deal with this mess alone, I swear." But the one that stood out was a photo my mom sent, the cottage taken at night, completely dark. No lights, no decorations, nothing, just the shell of what they'd expected. No firewood stacked, no presents laid out, no dinner on the table, just nothing. She captioned it, "Is this what you wanted?" I read that one 3 times. I didn't respond. Luca noticed I was distracted. That night, while we were having drinks with some of his friends in a noisy little bar near Tracy, he asked if I'd ever go back, not just physically, but back to how things were. I told him something I hadn't admitted out loud before. I said I didn't think they miss me. I think they just miss what I did for them. The organizing, the errands, the backup plans, the way I kept the wheels turning while they played the part of a normal, happy family. Luca didn't say anything. He just nodded and passed me another drink. On New Year's Eve, we stood on a rooftop as fireworks cracked across the sky. People shouted in 5 languages through confetti, danced in the cold. At midnight, someone tried to call me. I watched the screen flash, then go dark. I thought about how I used to spend that night setting up the fire pit, refilling champagne for my sister's friends, driving tipsy cousins back to their and there I was now, wrapped in someone else's coat, kissing a girl whose name I barely knew, with no one demanding anything from me. The next morning I booked a flight back, January 3rd. At the airport, I turned off airplane mode. It buzzed like it was choking. Messages flooded in, voicemails, missed calls, unread texts. But one stood out from my sister. "They sold your car. Hope your little vacation was worth it." I just stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I closed it and didn't open it again until I landed. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be some long-awaited conversation. It was going to be a battle. I got back to the States late afternoon, January 3rd. Took a shuttle from the airport, then a local bus, and finally walked the last stretch to my parents' house with a small suitcase and my winter coat half-zipped. I remember staring at the front door for a second before opening it, not because I was nervous, because I felt nothing. I stepped inside and the smell hit me. First, someone had been cooking, probably my mom, but the house was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Then it exploded. My mom came out of the kitchen first. She didn't say hi. She didn't even ask how the flight was. Just one long, sharp shout of my name that echoed through the house like I'd broken in. My dad followed behind her with this look, like he was deciding whether to lecture me or throw me out. He didn't have to say anything. I knew what room they wanted me in. I sat down in the living room and waited. My sister came Downstairs last wearing pajamas and an old hoodie like she'd been camped out in that house since Christmas Eve. She looked tired, annoyed, and ready to pick a fight. Then the yelling started, all of them at once, questions they didn't really want answers to. Where the hell were you? Do you think this is a game? You embarrassed us. Do you know how many people asked where you were? You ruined everything. We had to clean. We had to host. Your sister had to make dinner herself. You put all the pressure on us. How could you be so selfish? I didn't say anything for the first few minutes. I just let them spill it all. Let them turn the absence of me into the worst thing that had ever happened to them. Then I told them that I had gone to Rome, that I'd used my own money, that I spent Christmas surrounded by people who didn't treat me like a servant, that I didn't owe them an explanation for taking time for myself, that for years I'd been paying bills I never agreed to, covering debts that weren't mine, and getting nothing but guilt and obligation in return. I told them they didn't notice when I was here. They only noticed when I finally stopped saying yes. My mom told me I was being dramatic. My dad said I was acting like a teenager. My sister laughed under her breath and called it my main character phase. That's when something in me flipped. I stood up and said I was done being the one who made sure everything worked while they acted like I was just background noise. I wasn't staying in that house another night. I went upstairs, opened my closet, and pulled out the 2 duffel bags I packed before Rome just in case I came back. They pulled something like this. I knew them too well. I'd been preparing for this moment for years without realizing it. When I came back down with the bags, no one tried to stop me. I called the cab and stood by the front door until the driver pulled up. No one said goodbye. No one asked where I was going. They just stood in the hallway waiting for me to leave like I was a delivery they hadn't ordered. I gave the cab driver my girlfriend's address. She lived across town in a small apartment she rented with a friend who was out of town for the holidays. She opened the door, saw my bags and didn't ask questions. She just moved aside and let me in. I sat on the couch, took off my coat, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. That night I fell asleep before midnight and didn't wake up once, but I knew this wasn't over. I hadn't even unpacked yet, and the war was already waiting on the other side of my phone. I woke up on January 4th to the sound of my girlfriend making coffee and the glow of my phone lighting up the nightstand again and again. I hadn't touched it since the night before, but now the screen was flooded. 37 missed calls, voicemails, messages, stacked like a wall trying to keep me from breathing. 22 from my mom, 10 from my dad, a few from numbers I didn't even recognize, probably cousins, maybe neighbors. Who knows who they dragged into it now? All with the same goal. Make this about them. Make me feel like the bad guy for stepping away. I didn't open a single one. I just let it buzz out until it died. Then the message came through from my sister. They sold your car. It's gone. You want to play adult? Pay for your own damn ride. That one I read twice. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I realized something right then. They weren't trying to understand why I left. They didn't care. They were trying to punish me. I still didn't believe it at first. The car was mine. I paid for it in full 2 summers ago. I kept it spotless, kept it registered in my name. The title was in my drawer at home, locked. But then I remembered that drawer had a cheap key they duplicated years ago, without telling me. My room wasn't mine. My things weren't safe. I made a quick call to the dealership where I bought the car, pretending to be someone helping with paperwork. The guy on the phone pulled it up casually. Yep, sold, December 29th, in-person sale, cash, signed by my father. My hands went cold. Not from shock. There wasn't any left in me by then, but from clarity. They didn't even hesitate. My absence threatened their comfort, so they lashed out the only way they knew how. Financially, because that was always the language in our house. Power wasn't love or respect, it was control over money, over movement, over choices. I didn't Call them. I didn't even yell. I went to my girlfriend's tiny kitchen, poured a glass of tap water, and sat there, staring at the wall. She kept asking if I wanted to go after them legally, call the cops, take back what was mine, but I couldn't do it. Not because I was afraid, but because I already knew how that would go. They'd cry, my mom would twist it into betrayal, my dad would say I was tearing the family apart, my sister would say I was ruining her reputation, and somehow I'd still end up the villain. So instead I did something quiet, permanent. I changed the password to my bank account, moved every cent into a credit union they didn't know about, closed the joint card they had access to, canceled my old phone plan, created a new email, archived every message they'd ever sent, blocked them all. Then I sat there for 10 minutes, with my hands folded, not moving, not thinking, just existing without them in my head. Later that day I started searching for apartments, not maybe, someday apartments, real ones, studios, one-bedrooms, anything with a door I could lock and never have to explain myself behind again. By dinner, I had 3 tours booked, and that night, one final email got through from my mom. You've made your little point. Now come home before this becomes something you regret. I didn't answer. I read it once, then I deleted it because for the first time in 25 years I wasn't afraid of regretting anything. 2 days later, I stood outside a tiny third-floor walk-up with beige walls and floors that creaked. The air smelled like paint and dust, and the windows rattled if you tap them too hard. The place was nothing special, but it was mine. I signed the lease that afternoon, paid the deposit with the money they didn't know I had, and told the landlord I'd be moving in by the end of the week. He handed me the keys. I held them in my palm for a while, like they might disappear. That night I didn't sleep, not because I was nervous, because I knew what I had to do next, and there was no way to make it quiet. The next morning, I took a rideshare to my parents' house. My girlfriend offered to come with me, but I told her I needed to do it alone. She didn't push. I walked in using the spare key I still had. They weren't expecting me. My mom was in the kitchen scrolling through her phone. My dad was in the living room, watching some political news. My sister was upstairs, probably asleep, or pretending to be. It was dead silent for a few seconds after I opened the door. Then came the scream. It wasn't fear, it was anger. Pure, sharp, and immediate. My mom started demanding to know what I thought I was doing, walking in after everything, after ignoring them, blocking them, humiliating them. My dad stood up, like he was about to start one of his speeches. I didn't wait. I walked right past both of them up to my room, grabbed the bags I'd left packed and untouched since Rome, and stuffed in the last of my things. Not much. A few books, my laptop charger, some clothes. I didn't look at the photos on the walls. I didn't bother explaining. My sister appeared at the top of the stairs with her arms folded like she was waiting to be applauded for surviving the holidays without me. She asked where I was moving to. I didn't answer. My mom followed me halfway out the door, listing everything I was throwing away. My family, my support system, my responsibilities. She actually used that word, responsibilities. My dad asked me how I thought I was going to make it out there on your own. He said I was making the biggest mistake of my life, that I was running away from reality. I turned around in the doorway, with both bags over my shoulders. No, I said, I'm walking into it. Then I shut the door behind me, not slammed, just shut. I got into the cab and gave the driver the address to my new place. 10 minutes later I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and dropped my bags on the floor. I just stood there staring at the empty walls. No voices, no background noise, no orders, no guilt. Later that evening my girlfriend came over with groceries and a folding chair. We ate on the floor. She didn't say, I'm proud of you. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. That night, for the first time in my life, I slept in a space that felt like it belonged to me. No one knew where I was, and that was the best part. It's strange how quiet can feel like a gift. The first few Nights in my new apartment, I didn't turn on the TV or music. I just listened to the stillness. No footsteps outside my door, no yelling downstairs, no one calling my name because someone couldn't figure out how the Wi-Fi worked or because they didn't feel like going to the store. It was just me, a mattress on the floor, 2 folding chairs, a cheap table, and a tiny kitchen that actually stayed clean. I remember standing in the middle of the room my first morning, there, drinking coffee I made for myself, with a coffee maker I paid for, and thinking I can breathe here. I didn't tell anyone in my family where I was, not because I wanted to punish them, but because I needed to know what life felt like when I wasn't constantly being monitored, guilted, or used. No one deserved access to this new part of me until I decided they earned it. I blocked every number, every email even, changed my bank account entirely. New institution, new login, new everything, just cutting the last cords. I knew they tried to worm their way back in once the dust settled, but I made it impossible. There wasn't a crack for them to slip through. My girlfriends started coming over more often. We cooked together in that tiny kitchen. Sometimes we sat on the floor and ate noodles straight from the pot because I didn't have real plates yet. She never judged me, never. Once acted like this place wasn't enough, and for once I could let her in, fully. Not just as someone I saw after, sneaking around my family's expectations, but as part of my real life. One night I asked her if she thought my parents would ever try to show up. She said, maybe, but they won't find you. And she was right. The truth is, they never really saw me, not when I lived there, not when I worked 2 jobs to pay bills, they called family contributions, not when I stayed behind while my friends moved out and built lives, just so my sister didn't have to worry about the guest bathroom being clean before her friends came over, not once. So I stopped letting them. I started over. I got used to the quiet. I built a routine. I paid rent. I set my own rules. I met neighbors. I hosted friends. I kept things small, peaceful. Some nights I stayed up late, just because I could. I'd walk barefoot across the cold floor at 2 a.m., eat cereal, and watch the lights outside blink through the blinds, and every time, I'd smile. I still had bad days. Still missed the idea of what a family should be. But I didn't miss them. The calls eventually stopped. No new numbers, no emails, just silence. And that silence, it became peace. Now, a few months in, I look around this small apartment and realize I have everything I need. Not because it's perfect, but because it's mine, my space, my decisions, my life. I'm not the same person who cleaned the house while everyone else sat around, pretending Christmas just magically happened. I'm not the guy who handed over his paycheck for the sake of gratitude. I'm not a convenience anymore. I'm free, and I promise you, nothing they could say or do now would ever be enough to pull me back. I don't care if they cry. I don't care if they blame me. I don't care if they want to talk, because the second I walked out of that house, I wasn't their safety net anymore, and the silence they're hearing now, it's the sound of my life finally beginning. It had been 2 full weeks of silence. No calls, no emails, no random texts from cousins asking if I was okay. I was settling in. The studio still smelled like fresh paint and leftover takeout. I bought a real bed frame, some thrifted furniture, and even a rug that didn't match anything else, but it made the place feel warm. For the first time in my life, peace felt like my default. I started sleeping deeper. My girlfriend could come over whenever. I was working, paying bills, actually living. The noise had finally faded. Then one Friday morning something broke through. I was at work finishing up a project when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but I had a delivery coming that day, so I picked up. It wasn't a delivery, it was a lawyer. He introduced himself and said my name. I froze for a second. He asked if I had a few minutes to talk about a family-related financial issue. I told him I didn't owe anyone money. That's when he said it. I've been asked to reach out regarding an informal family loan arrangement from the past 5 years. I asked him what the hell he was talking about. He said my parents were claiming I had an outstanding obligation to them, that they had provided housing, transportation, and financial assistance since I turned 18, and they were now looking to formalize the repayment. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud in the middle of my office. He paused, then asked if I'd be open to a settlement discussion to avoid escalation. I told him there was nothing to settle, that they were grasping that if they wanted to try to sue their own son for rent I never agreed to, and money they took from me voluntarily, they were welcome to try. I hung up. I didn't hear from the lawyer again, but that night my blocked inbox lit up. A new email account, obviously my mom's. The tone was bitter, dramatic, pages long. She said I had forced them to take this route, that they hated doing this but couldn't let me walk away from my responsibilities like a child. She said they were entitled to compensation for everything they'd done to give me a good life. She even included a rough calculation: rent, groceries, emotional damage, and the kicker, interest. They wanted over $47,000. I sat there staring at the screen, not angry, not afraid, just stunned. They really thought this would scare me back into submission. They really thought they still had power over me. I didn't respond. I forwarded the email to a friend of mine who works in legal and asked if I needed to worry. He laughed, even harder than I did. No contract, no written agreement, no case, just another manipulation tactic, a threat with no teeth. A few days later, my girlfriend came over with champagne and 2 paper cups. "You're free now," she said, and I was not just physically but legally, emotionally, mentally. They had fired their last shot, and it had missed by a mile, and now I saw it for what it was, a sad, desperate attempt to claw back a son they never knew how to treat. Let them try whatever they want. I'm done.